welcome to my final video for Dr. Vardy's Narrative Medicine course, or English 3020. This is part 2 of a two-part podcast series where we explore our experience giving back to the community with street outreach teams based here in Detroit. If you want a little bit more background for what this organization is, you can watch part 1, which is our collective interview with Stanley, the sort of CEO of the organization, and that answers a lot of questions like the organization's mission statement, how they started, and how you can give back to them and help them continue to do the amazing work that they do. So I'm going to start off by kind of talking about how we first met Stanley. So we were introduced to him through our professor in our course where we are supposed to do field work, like in the field, either at a hospital or in a senior center, just something related to healthcare where we are able to experience other people's stories and be able to absorb them and then retell them through this kind of creative format. A lot of the spots filled up pretty quickly and there were schedule conflicts, but Dr. Vardy had this saved in her pocket, Plan B, and she let us know that the three of us, myself, Lily, and Natalie, could work with Stanley if he was so inclined, and thankfully he was. And we agreed to meet him on October 14th at 631 West 4th Street in Detroit. At around 3 p.m., we all arrived at this kind of rundown church warehouse looking thing. We first met Stanley Stinson, and he starts us off with a tour of the medical van, or the ambulance. So inside the ambulance, there are as many supplies as would be required in a standard emergency room or urgent care room. Stanley stressed this to us. It's very important that he is able to provide those resources to a community that has a harder time getting out to the hospitals. So we ended the tour in his office inside of the warehouse where he starts to kind of lay out the plan for today. He lets us know it's going to be a pretty long shift. They tend to stay out till about 12 in the morning, and it can be even longer than that. So we kind of start to mentally prepare. So 30 minutes later, Stanley's debriefing. We meet a few more people from the team. I'm just going to use initials in place of their names, so there is not much of a privacy issue there. So we meet A from another team. She is a holistic care specialist, and the other team that Stanley works with is called Avalon. Another woman named B, she's also a nurse, and she's kind of like Stanley's number 2. I noticed right away she's super smart and observant. We asked Stanley a few preliminary questions while we're waiting for everybody to get in, and he let us know that SOT also accepts undergraduate and graduate students for volunteering, and as we mentioned in the previous video, the whole program is volunteer-based. Stanley doesn't get paid, his volunteers don't get paid, completely non-profit organization. He also let us know that the team works alongside Street Medicine Detroit, or SMD, which is part of Wayne State's medical school. So I think it's really cool that the university and his organization are able to work together and kind of give back to both the student and the community. And Stanley mentioned that his organization is a part of Street Medicine International Student Coalition, or SMIC, which is an international organization that aims to band together the efforts of all of the different street outreach programs across the world. So I think that's really cool. Lily, Natalie, and I requested to sit together, and Stanley said the only way that was happening is if we sat in the back. The back part of the van is the patient care part of the van. Super bumpy, super fun. So in the back, we met 2 med student volunteers, J and N. They were very experienced with the volunteer sessions, and they were super happy to answer our questions, it being our first time. So we finally left the warehouse 30 minutes later, around 4:30. We talked to J and N, and we figured out that SOT's route varies a lot between dates and teams like Avalon. And we tried to ask them, like, how do you find these people? How do you know who to help? And they let us know that when you get more familiar with patients, you tend to know where they can be found. They also let us know that SOT primarily focuses on rough sleepers. So a rough sleeper is anybody that is homeless without adequate shelter and often sleeps on the sides of streets within the city. So not people who are accepted into homeless shelters. So I think that's really important. We finally get out and we turned out onto 30th and Edsel Ford Street to get onto I-94 East. And our very first stop is Maiden and Newport after we get off the freeway. We aren't really doing much. We're just kind of standing there and waiting to organize everybody into their positions. So we're back on the road, and Stanley first spots a woman that she's walking alone near Shamas and Wade. He radios the Avalon unit behind us that consists of 2 women at the moment. And I asked him why he didn't just call out to her by himself. He said that the women in that area tend to be a little flighty, especially around strange men screaming at them from cars. So he thought that she would feel more comfortable if she was approached by a woman. And I thought it was really kind and considerate of him to take that into mind. After the woman realized that we were here to help, she got all of her friends around the neighborhood and they all stopped by. We had basically a line around the corner. And then B hopped out of the van and she starts gathering names, ages, and basic medical information. I asked Stanley if there's like a particular way he likes to categorize patient files, and he said he just tries to get basic information to keep tabs on their progress if they're reoccurring patients, because it's just easier that way to keep track of everybody. Sorry, my dog was scratching at the door. So around 5:30, we are now handing out some sandwiches and water bottles and basic wound care stuff to some of the injured people approaching the van. I noticed that Stanley didn't really care what the person looked like or what they had to say. He just wanted to make sure they got the help they needed. We're back on the road and we start heading down towards downtown Detroit, and I have a quote in my field notes. When it was still kind of warm out, it wasn't cold and it wasn't snowing yet, but still warm enough that people could be outside. And he said that sleeping on the street in the summer is uncomfortable, but sleeping on the street in the winter is deadly. And those words stuck to me because people really do die in this kind of weather without the proper care and shelter. And it's really important for Stanley to be doing the kind of work he is to make sure that the resources are reaching everybody, regardless of their transportation ability. Around 6 o'clock, we made our way around this new building. We passed a classroom and there was a man, you could see the figure of him in the dark. And he looked really scared until he saw Stanley. He kind of lit up a little bit. It just kind of showed me how much credibility Stanley's team has, like, as a group. We get back on the road and we start driving. We arrive at Detroit Hope Center on MLK Jr. Boulevard and John C. Lodge Freeway. This was a really roughed up building. There was a broken staircase leading up to the second floor. The steps were like cut in half in some places. Some were just missing a step. We found a man kind of in the corner of the second floor and he's under another black tarp. Had out this really, really bad cough, and he told us that he's been kind of dealing with this for a few weeks. She gives him some cough medicine, something to eat, and some water, and asked him if he needs anything else, and he said no, thank you. He went back to sleep. That was all we could do there. We are back on the road, we start driving, and we're kind of near this underpass area, and in between like each of the iron poles holding up the bridge, there's like a hammock tied in between each one, and there are people taking shelter in between. We're kind of stopping at each hammock, anywhere that there's a person, and just handing out some blankets or food and water. One of the hammocks was empty, and this was important to Stanley because that was one of his regular patients, and he was gone, and he had happened to leave behind his 2 dogs. And we honestly don't know what happened to him. So I wanted to throw this in here just to remind everybody that it is good to do that kind of work, but it takes a toll, an emotional toll on you, because that's just kind of the harsh reality that not everybody makes it, regardless of how hard you try. Around 9 p.m., we finally take a food break. I think Stanley realizes that we were starving and would probably pass out soon. He took us to his favorite Mexican restaurant, Los Corrales. I was super grateful. I love Mexican food. We got some chicken and pork tacos for everybody, and we were starving, so we ate all of it. About an hour later, this around 11 p.m., we got to this kind of homeless encampment by the side of the freeway. B goes back in with her flashlight. She's kind of spotting everybody, and she says that some of the people that came by usually ask her for food and water, but this time they seemed to be pretty good. They just needed some blankets and a tent. We're also super grateful and happy to see B and Stanley, and it's just such a heartwarming experience to be able to see all that. The last story I want to tell you guys is going to be towards the very end of the night. So around 12 a.m. when Stanley said we would be done. So we've been on the road for about 9 hours now. We noticed that the amount of people that we're seeing on the street has decreased a lot. So we're like, okay, I think we can head back now. We're not really seeing anybody. I can't remember what road it was, maybe Grand Boulevard. And I see this kid kind of on like his knees on like a scooter, and he's like kicking with his other leg, and he's like kind of waving at us. Like he's really trying to get our attention. I pointed out to Stanley, and we kind of like pointed to the parking lot to the side where we could meet him. And we noticed he was disabled. hence the scooter. Stanley asked what we could do for him, and he kind of unwrapped the dressing on his knee to show us, and it was a horrible injury. The skin was almost rotting. It was like dark purple flesh, blood, pus, all kind of jumbled together. And I got a little nauseous. He told us that he was suffering from sepsis, and most hospitals were turning him away because he lacked proper documentation. Stanley nodded, and B helped get him into the van, into the patient care area for proper examination and treatment. As he's getting treated in the back, we're just kind of talking to Stanley in the front, and we noticed a police car kind of come around the back, and it stops right by where like Stanley's window is. Police officer and Stanley have just like an intense stare off. The officer did not say anything. He didn't gesture anything, just at Stanley. I was like, what was that? Like, I've never seen that happen. Is that normal? He said that, to be honest, the police have no interest in the well-being of the homeless. If they're seeing an unhoused person on the street, they don't really care about their well-being because to them, that's not in their job description. It kind of broke my heart because he told Lily and I that in all of his run-ins with the police, they have only tried to terrorize his operation and the homeless in the process. So he has a bit of a beef with the DPD, and rightfully so. 12:45 a.m., we finally finished patching him up. He was so grateful from the bottom of his heart, and Stanley just told him to please stay safe and we would be back to check on him soon. 1:15, we finally arrived back at 631 West 4th Street after what felt like one of the longest nights of my life. We said goodbye and thank you to Stanley for an amazing experience, and Lily gave me a ride home. So that was a recap of my entire night volunteering with street outreach teams. I tried to kind of cram in all the information because I was getting it from my field notes, and it was really hard to kind of condense the whole story because we just had so many interactions with so many people. I will say I'm super grateful for the experience. Overall, I just want to say thank you to Stanley for all of the work that he does. And yeah, thank you for listening. Hi guys, I'm being interrupted by my dogs. Hi. I'm gonna keep you in the video, Holly.